So I'm Jonah Strauss. I'm the executive director of the Oakland Warehouse Coalition. Senator Skinner, I've met with Casey and Ariana. So first of all, one of the things that I wanted to accomplish here today was give each of you a copy of our Emergency Tenant Protection Ordinance, which we wrote and submitted on December 23rd under Title 28 in Oakland, which essentially is the answer to what do we do about housing post-Go Ship. We haven't been able to get it through our city attorney, so it'd be nice if people at the state level would take a look at it. What I've discovered is that in participating in these state level meetings, it's a very different culture than exists in Oakland. We're in a sort of tough spot where, as I think has been mentioned before today, that we have a culture of everybody worrying about getting sued. There's a lot of liability first concerns, right? And so as soon as we get up to the state level, it becomes a much more creative conversation. And so I really appreciate, Mr. Allen, your thoughtful questions to some of the presenters today. But I'll tell you something, my organization has been, along with Safer DIY Spaces, and David Keenan unfortunately couldn't make it in person here today, but he's sort of my counterpart in Sunuba and Tom's organization's DIY, where we are sort of the boots on the ground, visiting spaces. I know Wab has done a little bit of that as well, but we're doing a lot of direct tenant support, a lot of direct work with the city. And I have to tell you, in no uncertain terms, well, first of all, the mayoral executive order of January 11th was very nice. I mean, it was clearly coming from the right place. It had some heart. It used a lot of language from our emergency tenant protection ordinance, which the mayor will admit if you ask her, and she did thank us for it. There's a huge disparity between the sort of values expressed in the mayoral executive order versus the way the city actually functions. So what we've found is that code enforcement has been very aggressively going after spaces in order to protect their own liability. We've found that, certainly with help from the media, it's very easy to expose spaces. But then what happens is, basically in a functional sense, what happens is a space will have sort of like a scheduled inspection or a citation for potential residential use, and then regardless of what happens with that inspection, regardless of how aggressive the city is, we have some very reactionary, actually not some, most very reactionary landlords who then go after the tenants in no uncertain terms. So we've had this wave of evictions, and I was reading something online today in sort of a community chat group, and somebody said the Oakland warehouse scene is dying, and it's absolutely true. So I just urge you to consider, when you have a bunch of, albeit nonprofit developers coming up and saying, hey, look at these wonderful, wonderful manufactured creative communities, I mean, that's all well and good, and if there's a way to make it actually affordable for the people who could potentially be residents there statewide, that would be great. But the bottom line is that, especially in this intense housing crisis in the Bay Area, we're not protecting artists. People are, not just artists, but I talk about low-income tenants as a wider whole. We're really not protecting these folks. Our first obligation, especially at a state level, is to enact legislation, and Senator Skinner, I really appreciate your upcoming contributions towards this, that will allow sort of a sustainable model for our low-income live-work communities. And I'd be happy to go into more detail about that. I understand everybody's tired, and we got to give up the room at a certain point. But we wrote an entire ordinance. There's 14 sections of it that I'll hand to you. And what I would hope is that we would simply look at this as a model ordinance moving forward, and maybe apply some of the closing of the loopholes in live-work in Oakland to other cities in our state.